Mass deportations are on the rise in 2025. Governments around the world are tightening immigration policies, leading to millions being forced out of their host countries. Whether due to economic struggles, political shifts, or security concerns, these deportations are reshaping global migration patterns. So, which countries are cracking down the hardest? Stay with us as we count down the countries ramping up mass deportations in 2025. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more engaging content. Let's get started. Number 10. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has long been a destination for migrant workers, particularly from South Asia and Africa. But in 2024, the kingdom has accelerated its deportation efforts. Recent crackdowns have targeted undocumented workers as part of the government's Vision 2030 initiative to prioritize local employment. Over 800,000 migrants were deported in 2023 alone, with numbers expected to rise this year. The majority of those deported are from countries like Bangladesh, India, and Ethiopia, who often work in construction, domestic service, or agriculture. Saudi authorities are conducting mass raids in workplaces and residential areas, making it nearly impossible for undocumented workers to stay undetected. Labor laws in Saudi Arabia are notoriously strict, and the sponsorship system, or kafala, leaves many workers vulnerable to exploitation. When their visas expire or employers revoke sponsorships, workers face immediate detention and deportation. Many describe the deportation process as harsh, with reports of overcrowded detention centers and limited access to legal representation. The impact on families is devastating, as deported workers often leave behind loved ones who depend on their remittances. While Saudi Arabia justifies the deportations as part of its labor reform efforts, critics argue that the kingdom lacks a humane approach to managing its migrant population. Number 9. Italy. Italy has been grappling with an influx of migrants arriving via the Mediterranean, and in 2024, the government is ramping up deportation efforts. Recent policies target undocumented migrants and asylum seekers whose applications have been denied. The Italian government has pledged to deport over 100,000 migrants this year. North African migrants make up a significant portion of those being deported, particularly from Tunisia, Algeria, and Libya. Italy has struck deals with these countries to expedite repatriation processes, further accelerating deportations. These agreements often include financial incentives to ensure cooperation from migrant-sending nations. Overcrowded migrant reception centers in Italy have been a flashpoint for controversy. Reports of inadequate living conditions and slow processing times have led to protests and criticism from human rights groups. The deportation process often involves sudden detentions, leaving migrants with little time to prepare or appeal. Italy's far-right government, led by Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, has taken a hardline stance on immigration, framing deportations as a solution to national security and economic concerns. Critics, however, argue that the policy overlooks the root causes of migration and risks violating international human rights laws. As deportations increase, the tension between Italy and the European Union's immigration policies continues to grow. Number 8. Malaysia. Malaysia has intensified its deportation efforts in 2024, targeting undocumented migrants from neighboring countries like Indonesia, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. The government has been conducting mass raids in urban areas, detaining thousands of migrants who lack proper documentation. The construction and plantation industries, which rely heavily on migrant labor, are among the hardest hit. Many undocumented workers have been detained during workplace inspections and immediately deported. Reports suggest that over 150,000 migrants were deported from Malaysia in 2023, with numbers expected to rise this year. Detention centers in Malaysia have faced widespread criticism for overcrowding and poor conditions. Human rights groups have documented cases of abuse and inadequate access to health care for detained migrants. The government has defended its actions, stating that deportations are necessary to curb illegal migration and protect local jobs. Malaysia's policies have also sparked tensions with neighboring countries, particularly Indonesia and the Philippines, whose citizens make up a large portion of the deported population. Diplomatic efforts to address these issues have so far yielded limited results. Number 7. United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is taking a tougher stance on immigration in 2024, with mass deportations becoming a key component of its strategy. The government has been targeting undocumented migrants, asylum seekers, and those who have overstayed their visas. Deportation flights have increased significantly, with hundreds of individuals sent back each week. Many of those deported are from countries like Albania, Nigeria, and Pakistan, with the UK signing agreements to streamline the repatriation process. In some cases, entire families have been removed, leaving communities shaken. Critics argue that the UK's policies are disproportionately harsh, particularly for asylum seekers fleeing conflict or persecution. Detention centers like Yarl's Wood have been at the center of controversy, with reports of inhumane conditions and inadequate legal support for detainees. The UK government, however, maintains that deportations are necessary to enforce immigration laws and reduce pressure on public services. The controversial Illegal Migration Act, passed in 2023, has made it easier for the government to detain and deport asylum seekers who arrive via unauthorized routes. Human rights groups have called the policy a violation of international law, as it limits asylum seekers' ability to appeal their cases. Despite the backlash, the UK shows no signs of slowing its deportation efforts. For immigrants hoping to start a new life in the UK, the environment is becoming increasingly hostile. Number 6. Australia. Australia has intensified its deportation policies in 2024, focusing on undocumented migrants and individuals who have overstayed their visas. The government has ramped up efforts to deport thousands of people annually, particularly those from Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands, and South Asia. The move aligns with its broader strategy to tighten border security. A significant portion of deportations involves those who arrived on temporary visas and failed to renew them. Australia's strict visa policies mean that even minor infractions, such as failing to meet income requirements, can lead to deportation. The government has also been targeting individuals with criminal records, deporting them regardless of the duration of their stay in the country. Detention centers such as those on Christmas Island have been criticized for poor conditions and the prolonged detention of migrants awaiting deportation. Human rights organizations have highlighted cases of family separations and inadequate access to legal representation during the deportation process. Australia has defended its actions, claiming that mass deportations are necessary to maintain the integrity of its immigration system. However, critics argue that the policies disproportionately affect vulnerable communities, particularly refugees and asylum seekers fleeing persecution. While Australia remains a desirable destination for skilled migrants, the tough stance on undocumented individuals has created uncertainty for those trying to build a life in the country. Number 5. South Korea. South Korea is experiencing a rise in mass deportations in 2024 as part of its effort to manage its growing migrant population. With an increasing number of undocumented workers, particularly from Southeast Asia and South Asia, the government has been conducting nationwide crackdowns. Over 30,000 undocumented migrants were deported in 2023, and the number is expected to increase this year. The deportations primarily target those working in agriculture, manufacturing, and construction industries heavily reliant on migrant labor. Raids on workplaces and residential areas have become more frequent, with many migrants detained and deported within weeks. These actions have left businesses scrambling to fill labor shortages. Detention centers in South Korea have been criticized for overcrowding and harsh treatment of detainees. Migrants often face limited access to legal counsel and translators, making it difficult to appeal deportation decisions. Human rights groups have raised concerns about the lack of due process for many individuals. The South Korean government justifies its actions by citing the need to address illegal immigration and prioritize local employment. However, critics argue that these policies fail to address the underlying issues of labor shortages and the demand for migrant workers in low-wage sectors. However, the heightened risk of deportation is forcing many to reconsider their plans to work and live in the country. Number 4. United States. The United States has long been at the center of immigration debates, and in 2024, deportations remain a key part of its immigration enforcement strategy. The U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) has increased deportation rates, targeting undocumented migrants and those with criminal records. Nearly 300,000 people were deported in 2023, with higher numbers projected this year. Deportations primarily focus on migrants from Central America, particularly those from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. These individuals often enter the U.S. seeking refuge from violence and poverty, but face expedited removal under strict immigration policies. The controversial use of detention centers has also continued, with thousands of migrants held while awaiting deportation. Family separations remain a contentious issue, as many deported individuals leave behind children who are U.S. citizens. Critics argue that these policies create long-term harm for families and communities. Detention conditions have also faced widespread criticism, with reports of overcrowding, inadequate medical care, and limited access to legal representation. The Biden administration has faced pressure to balance humanitarian concerns with border security. While some policies have aimed to provide pathways for legal immigration, enforcement efforts remain a significant part of the U.S. approach to managing its migrant population. Number 3. Turkey. Turkey has become a hotspot for migrants and refugees, particularly from Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq. In 2024, the Turkish government is intensifying its deportation efforts as part of its strategy to manage one of the largest refugee populations in the world. Over 120,000 migrants were deported in 2023, and the numbers are expected to rise. The government has been targeting undocumented migrants and refugees whose temporary protection statuses have expired. Mass raids in urban centers like Istanbul and Ankara have led to thousands of detentions. Many migrants report being deported without adequate time to appeal or secure legal support. Conditions in deportation centers have been criticized for being overcrowded and unsanitary. Human rights organizations have documented cases of forced deportations, even for individuals with valid asylum claims. Turkey's policies have drawn criticism from international watchdogs and migrant advocacy groups. The government defends its actions by citing the strain on public resources and infrastructure caused by the high number of migrants. However, critics argue that the focus on deportations ignores the root causes of migration and fails to provide long-term solutions for both migrants and host communities. Number 2. India. India has ramped up deportations in 2024, targeting undocumented immigrants, particularly from Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Nepal. The government's focus on border security and illegal immigration has led to mass deportation drives, with thousands of migrants detained and sent back to their home countries. The Rohingya community, a stateless minority from Myanmar, has been a primary target of India's deportation efforts. Thousands of Rohingya refugees face detention and deportation despite fleeing persecution in their homeland. Human rights groups have criticized India for violating international refugee protections. Deportation crackdowns are often concentrated in urban areas like Delhi and Kolkata, where large migrant populations reside. Detention centers in these regions are overcrowded, with reports of poor living conditions and inadequate legal resources for detainees. The Indian government defends its actions by citing national security and economic concerns. However, critics argue that the policies disproportionately target vulnerable populations and fail to address the systemic issues driving migration. Number 1. Russia. Russia has significantly increased deportations in 2024 as part of its crackdown on undocumented migrants. The country's migrant workforce, primarily from Central Asia, has been heavily impacted. Over 250,000 individuals were deported in 2023, with mass raids and detentions continuing this year. Migrant workers from countries like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan are often employed in construction, agriculture, and low-wage jobs. Many of these workers lack proper documentation due to bureaucratic hurdles, making them easy targets for deportation. Russia's tightening of immigration laws has left little room for appeals. Detention centers in Russia have been criticized for overcrowding, poor conditions, and allegations of abuse. Migrants often face sudden deportations without proper legal representation or notification. These practices have drawn condemnation from human rights organizations. The Russian government justifies its actions as a measure to prioritize employment opportunities for its citizens amid economic challenges. However, critics argue that these policies ignore the essential contributions of migrant workers to Russia's economy. That's today's list. Deportation policies are reshaping lives and communities around the globe, sparking debates about fairness, security, and human rights. What do you think about these policies? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the videos popping up now for more insights. Thanks for watching, and as always, be kind to one another.